Spotlighting Hawaii's leaders.
We want to bring in Governor David Ige.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor.
Lieutenant Governor, good morning. Thanks so much for joining us. Mayor Derek Kawakami.
Thank you so much, Senator, for being here.
Spotlighting the issues.
Where is the virus right now in our community?
How much is this overall going to cost the state?
How are you responding to the community's concerns? Talk about the level of citations that you guys are writing.
Spotlight Hawaii with Yanji Denise and Ryan Kalei-Suji on the digital platforms of the Honolulu Star-Advertiser.
This episode of Spotlight Hawaii is brought to you by Longstrugs.
Hey, happy Aloha Friday. Thank you so much for joining us here on Spotlight Hawaii. I'm Yanji Denise, joined by Ryan Kalei-Suji on the digital platforms of the Honolulu Star-Advertiser. Ryan, we're delving into the world of politics today and shining the spotlight on the race for Senate.
That's right. We are joined this morning by candidate for Congress, Hawaii House Representative Bob McDermott, joining us this morning. Good morning, Representative. Thanks so much for being here and joining us. Let's just start off asking you and begin this conversation on why you decided to give up your Hawaii House seat that you've represented for some time to enter this race for Congress.
Yeah, thanks for asking. Most people view it as a real long shot, underdog, if you will. And I'm not raising any money, right? Because I knew Brian had $4 million out of the gate. I can't compete with that. Nobody's going to raise that kind of money in Hawaii except maybe somebody as talented as Linda Lingle as a Republican, and I don't have her skills, obviously. So I just wanted to run because Red Hill was just at the time was such an issue that I felt I had to come out and, if you will, lead the charge on that, because being an old Marine, running the Navy League for over a decade, people knew I supported the military, a pro-military guy. So when I come out and say, let's close Red Hill, people took it seriously. And I say this immodestly, but when I came out, the floodgates opened, if you will, and it all started moving at that point because a lot of my colleagues were afraid to be called anti-military. It's such a big contributor to our economy. And that's a national strategic asset, by the way. So you have to know what you're talking about. And I think I did. And after that was last September, October, the floodgates opened. So that was the main thing. Also, the 13 Marines who died last year, and there was a soldier and a sailor. So I think it was a total of 13 or 15 young people who passed away, perished in Afghanistan. I know from my training that's not supposed to happen. And I was sitting here and I literally had tears in my eyes for 2 days because those kids were my kids. Not literally speaking, but figuratively speaking. And I knew what they did and I knew their training. And I was in the first Desert Storm over in Saudi Arabia. Not nearly as dangerous as what these guys do, clearly. But I knew what they did. And I said, I have to do something. I know what the odds are. I know what the chances are, but I can't sit here on my butt and not do anything. And so those two things really prodded me to run.
Let's talk a little bit more about Red Hill. What do you think of the timeline that the Navy has now put out, shaving off 3 months off the end, that somewhat truncated timeline, and now we have Rear Admiral Wade at the helm of the defueling process, at least having one person that everyone can go to with their issues on this. What differently do you think, if you were part of the congressional delegation, would you do, and what could you bring to the table that's not happening right now?
Certainly. Well, the first thing I would do would be demand a closure date. We do not have a closure date in writing right now. There's none. I mean, there's potential defueling dates, which are, forward and coming back and on. But there's no closure date. And my contention is, and I have to point out differences, that our two senators haven't made the case to the Republican colleagues to close this place, and they haven't done that. If I go back to the Dan Inouye example. If Dan Inouye was alive, he'd pick up the phone, call Bob Dole, one of his best friends, or Ted Stevens from Alaska, one of his best friends, both Republicans, by the way, call him up and said, Bob, I need your help, Bob Dole. We got to do this. And Dole would say, whatever you want, Danny, because they worked together. There wasn't this vitriol that we have. And I will tell you, you can go to the State House. We don't behave that way that they do in D.C. Make stuff up, lie. You can't. There's rules, right? What you say on the floor, we got rules. You can't insult someone. You can't do this, can't do that. Anyway, I would get a law passed, a statute that says it's closing this date and we are appropriating this much money. That hasn't happened. And they've had several opportunities to do this. The infrastructure bill last year, which occurred after the May spill, it was about August, September, not 10 cents for infrastructure for Red Hill. How do you explain that? You have a Democrat president, Democrat Secretary of Defense, Democrat Secretary of Navy, united congressional delegation. Please tell me why there is no closure date yet. Why it's not in statute. You control the House, you control the Senate, and you have the presidency. Do you think for one moment if Donald Trump was president and he had a Republican SecDef, Republican Secretary of the Navy, that they wouldn't once say, he's engaging in racial genocide because he's polluting this water that ethnic people drink, minorities, Native Hawaiians? Of course they would. But because it's their guy, they're quiet. And I have to tell you, I know you guys, and I appreciate you having me on, but the media hasn't held their feet to the fire. They're the only recourse we have. The only lever of power we have is our congressional delegation on federal issues. And if we let them off the hook, what happens? Nothing, right? I mean, that's so I would get a law passed right away. And if I couldn't do it, I wouldn't run for re-election, period.
And let's dive a little bit more into that.
Within 2 years.
There has been, some of when looking at the timeline that the military has presented, and then this revised timeline that shaved off a few months, a lot of the factors that they're saying is that it's going to take time because they want to do this safely. They want to ensure that the process is one that is thoroughly vetted and to ensure that there is no further leakage. So their reasoning for maybe not putting out a date is because that scale can change so rapidly, dependent on variables that they're not sure of at this time. How would you respond, or how would you work directly with the military if they aren't able to commit? Because there is this balance between what the congressional delegation wants, but also what the military is presenting, which has at times not been truthful. I think that is something else in this whole issue of Red Hill is the relationship between the state and the military and information and transparency that has been lacking at times.
Very good questions, Ryan. It pains me to say this, but as a pro-military guy, I had sent out some press releases on Red Hill. And this is early on. And immediately, last December, the Navy shot one out in response, saying, I don't know what I'm talking about. The tanks are fine. The press release had to do with the tanks crumbling. The concrete shell, the cup, if you will, that the steel tanks sit on, the concrete cup, has rebar in it, right? And the moisture from Halava Valley comes in, and there's a crack in the concrete, gets in the rebar, it rusts. The rebar sprawls, and the concrete pops open. Hawaiian Dredging did a report about 2012 or 2014. Forgive me for a moment. Hawaiian Dredging, our local company, said the concrete is busting and cannot be repaired because the way they built it, there's no crawl spaces. And what happened was that report is there. I have it in black and white. They changed. The Navy changed it, had the contractor come back and just take that part out. And I asked a friend of mine who used to work there how that happened. And he simply said the Navy wasn't going to pay him. And that's when you get $1 million contractor, you're not going to pay you unless you take this out. We disagree with you. Okay. Which leads me to the next, and I'm all over the map here, but the next phase is the defueling order. You keep hearing about defueling. It's not a shutdown. You've probably read the defueling order. I have. It's empty the tank, find the puka, fix the puka, come back in for a new permit, which, by the way, they don't need the state of Hawaii's permission. I had 2 attorneys look at it early on because I was going to introduce a law to shut it down. They said, Bob, it's federal property. It's the federal government supersedes the state of Hawaii. All they have to do is claim national defense, national security, and all this stops. Let's take a moment to think about what's happened. The Secretary of Defense comes out and says, I want to close Red Hill. That's it. Front page of your paper, the Advertiser, Red Hill to close. Okay, show me a date. Where is it? It's not, right? This is an utterance by a senior elected official. And what happened was all the discovery of these lawsuits by the Water Alliance, by the state wanting to know answers on the permitting questions, all that discovery stopped. It all stopped because we're going to close it. Oh, we are? Well, tell me when. They're spending over $100 million to improve things, to make them safer, as you said. They're going to make it so safe that, you know what, we spent $200 million improving the infrastructure, undergirding it. This stuff is safe now. We'll just quietly continue on. There are people up there who think it's safe. You heard this. The tanks didn't leak. It was the piping. So the tanks are fine. They're not fine. They're old. If nothing else, they leak. Of course, I'm old too, so I still function though. But that's what's going on. So to answer your question, you can do it safely. They said they could empty those things in 24 hours. Remember, I don't know if you remember all this. They're safe. We can empty them in 24 hours. Now when is the date to close the facility? And that's my big bone, because the media, and again, present company excluded, it is more the print reporters. They're not saying it. Look, you control all the levers of power. Democrat president, SecNav, SecDef, United delegation. You can't close this? It's leaking diesel into our drinking water. And you call yourself a climateer? A climateer? Are you kidding me? So this is how frustrated I get, right?
Well, I want to get back to something that you referenced earlier, was just overall campaign strategy. Given that you are not out fundraising, what are you doing to try to get this message out? Because you left a pretty comfortable seat, I would think, at the state legislature. You've been there for quite a long time. What's the strategy in this race, and how do you hope to make inroads now?
Well, it's just social media, Yunji, opportunities like this. I've been around 16 years. You guys probably had an opinion of me prior to this interview. I hope it's improved since then, because I kind of know what the general opinion is. But people know me. No amount of advertising is going to change that, right? But if you notice, he's not saying anything either. I mean, he's been very quiet. He's got a couple internet commercials, but so I'm happy where we're at, because anything can happen. And I really do believe that. You know, I wish Brian no ill will, and I serve with him. I know him. We're friendly. We see each other. There's no hatred there, no vitriol. We just honestly have a different approach on issues. And if the public, I believe this honestly, could look at both of us, and if you took the R away and said, okay, on the issues, one by one, what do local people want, and what does he deliver? Let's take gasoline. I don't believe the world is going to end because of climate change. In fact, I believe Akua is in charge, not man. And then I look at it, okay, where are you going to put all these electric cars on Dillingham Avenue, where all those 3-story walk-ups are? Where are you going to put the charging stations? Oh, let's go to Salt Lake. Where are you going to put the charging stations? Or let's go to Eva Beach, where I live, old Eva Beach, where there's no parking on the street because multi-generational families live there. Where are you going to put the charging stations? Well, by the way, do you have $70,000 for an electric car? Most people don't. And if they have a public charging station, at best case scenario, it takes 15 minutes to charge your vehicle. How would you like to pull in and be the fourth guy in line? I mean, they haven't thought it through. And I love the Trump era energy policies. I am all about $2 a gallon gas. You may not like Trump, and that's fine. He reminds me of the plumber and this is my view of Trump. He reminds me of the plumber you call to your house on New Year's Eve when your toilet's backed up. You got a problem, you need it fixed, but you don't want him hanging around afterwards at the party in his dirty clothes and his plumber's butt cleavage showing. You want to send him out the door, right? Well, that's the way I view Trump. I love his policies, but I got to be honest with you. He says things that I would correct my children on. I wouldn't slap their face, but I would scold them. The way he's talked to people. I'll give you an example. Jeff Sessions. He didn't deserve to be treated like that. Nobody does. Guy dedicated his life to public service, and he helped you so much. But the guy's policies were spot on, and that's what we're about, right? Policies. Let's take immigration, for example. We both know, all three of us here, know someone who died from fentanyl overdose. Everybody in the state of Hawaii knows someone who died from a fentanyl overdose. Who is that? Colt Brennan. He died from fentanyl. It was in the autopsy. It was released. He was in California. Where did that fentanyl come from? Well, I wasn't there, but I can assume it came over the Mexican border, right? And the victimization of women that we are allowing and encouraging. These young girls and women are being raped. They have rape trees. You've seen it where they thought. Let's go back to the policies 2 years ago when the border was basically shut down. They're bringing kids across the border who don't have any parents. They're coming across and some guy claims a little girl. How do we know he's even related to her? And what we're doing right now, it's a magnet for these folks to come in. So how does that affect Hawaii? I mean, the border's not here. I tell you who it affects. It impacts the Filipino community. These poor folks play by the rules. They immigrate from the Philippines. They have to have either special training, special education. They got to wait 10 years to get a visa to come, right? And then when they're here for 5 years, they cannot get any welfare or public assistance because they have to have a sponsor who agrees to pay for them and take care of them. Okay, they play by the rules, and they're looking over here, and everybody's just walking across. That, of course, that drives wages down, and there's a whole myriad of things. But without a border, you don't have a country. And right now, listen, it's really bad. And I think they make the case to go back to the policies of 2 years ago are far better. Inflation is being driven by high energy prices. It's so clear. Everything's connected. Take that thing of chicken you buy at Sam's Club, right? That's where with my large family, that's where I shop for food. I don't go to Safeway or Foodland. I can't afford it. Buy the big tray of chicken. Used to be $8. Now it's about 12 or 15. What increased the cost of that? Well, the styrofoam that holds it's made out of petroleum. The saran wrap's made out of petroleum. The truck that brings it to you uses gas. Everything uses gas. That's why, and when that doubles, everything else doubles, and it's a cascading effect. So Brian and I have very different views on everything, and it would be quite entertaining if some of the stations would have us debate, because we don't hate each other, and no hatred going on. It's just, look, he believes in climate change. I'm a skeptic. I don't. I believe God's in charge of Kua, and I don't see how it makes the life of the local guy trying to make ends meet, the little guy, the Frank Fossey constituent, how his life is empowered by getting an electric car. I just don't get it. And I don't see what a difference it makes when China, the world's largest polluter, by far is exempt from all environmental regulations, the Paris Climate Accords, every other UN regulation, because they're considered a developing country. They're not.
Let's expand a little bit and bring that argument home a little more when you're talking about climate change. I mean, recently there was a report in our own paper, the Star-Advertiser, about the homes on the North Shore that are dealing with these rising sea levels. We're seeing homes literally falling into the ocean because of the impacts of this sea level rises, and UH experts expect that to continue on in the decades to come. What would you say to those residents who are seeing firsthand the impact of these rising sea levels, and how would you help to address their needs or those needs who are impacted who live near the coastal areas?
Very good point, Ryan, and I'm sorry I misspoke. I think man-made climate change, I'm skeptical of. The climate changes, clearly. One of my jobs is a commercial realtor, so I get information. Eva Beach used to be underwater. I don't know if you're aware. Eva Beach entirely was underwater. The climate changed, right? The climate changed. The sea level receded. I wasn't here. I didn't do it, but Eva Beach used to be underwater. I just read a report the other day of a commercial property I was looking to. They do a geographical and geology study right by Queens Hospital, St. Francis West, now Queens West. That area was underwater. So yes, the climate changes, but is man in control? I don't think so. You can't tell me if it's going to rain next Thursday, but you're going to tell me what the temperature is going to be in 100 years? I don't buy it. I just don't.
That's a clear difference between you and Senator Schatz. I think another clear difference. I think another clear difference would likely be your stance on something that is being debated at the federal level, and that is abortion. I'm interested to know your thoughts on Lindsey Graham's proposal of having a 15-week sort of limit or federal ban on abortion. If you think this is something that should be left to the states, and what you think of the Dobbs decision, just your thoughts on that.
Yeah, clearly I'm pro-life. I think the decision, I don't support Graham's proposal because the whole purpose was to let the states decide, right? And that's where it should be, in your local communities and your local neighbor making those decisions for you based on your input, right? So I'm pro-life. Look, the issue is, we talked about this before we went on, but I love kids. I got 8 kids. And I've got like 11 grandkids. I say like because the number keeps changing. These McDermotts are quite fruitful. The number keeps changing. Every time I turn around, got another one. Okay, got another one. So I love kids. So I can't even fathom that. And my lovely wife is a chaplain in a hospital. I don't want to mention the name, but you can figure it out. And she doesn't go to the happy floor. She goes to the floor. A couple of weeks ago, she told me, she said, honey, I had a tough day. I pick her up every day, drop her off. I said, what happened? I had 3 children this week that passed away, 3 infants. So the hospital she works at, that's what they do. They do kids and women, children, you figure it out. These are little babies that are born with their heart outside their body or their intestines outside their tummy. And the parents are heartbroken. Or it's a stillbirth. Or the baby lives for 2 weeks and then dies. And she counsels those parents. And those children are loved. And as an adoptive father, I can tell you that I will personally commit to find a home for every kid who wants one. That's not been my calling in life, but it's kind of been what my wife and I kind of like our personal way to give back, since we're not wealthy or anything, was to care for these kids. And it has been so rewarding. It's so rewarding. I'm the richest guy in the world.
Well, our time is wrapping up here. It's half an hour goes really quickly. But before we let you go, just, what would you say to those out there, voters out there who are watching, who are trying to make up their mind? Why do you believe that your candidacy and you being elected into the seat would be beneficial for the state of Hawaii?
Well, from a technical point of view, we're such a small state. If you have a Republican senator and a Democrat senator pulling in the same direction, close Red Hill, it's going to get closed mighty fast. I could go talk to some of those redneck guys and say, look, you're polluting our water, fellas. We got to shut this thing down. Are you sure, Bob? Yeah, okay. Well, Bob was a Marine. Let's listen to him. I mean, that alone is real. And trying to emulate the Dan and Noe, he was the best as far as being able to serve the citizens of Hawaii. And we need guys like that who aren't afraid to be friends with people in the other party. That's just as simple. I'm not vitriolic. I'm on the issues. I'm strong on the issues, and I might say things about an issue that people don't like, but I don't personally attack people. Generally speaking, I try not to, particularly as I'm getting older. I may fall once in a while, but I'm trying not to do that. I'm trying to be a better person as I get older. So.
That's something we can all aspire to. Thank you so much, Representative from Ewa Beach, Bob McDermott, now a candidate for U.S. Senate from the Republican side, challenging Brian Schatz. Thank you so much for joining us. We do appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you. It was delightful, guys. Have a great day.
Thank you so much. Well, interesting to hear from him, Ryan. He really says that he, for all intents and purposes, is a single issue candidate, that issue being Red Hill. He said that the incident at Red Hill, and just reading about it, talking to whistleblowers, talking to Ernie Lau and different actors in that arena, really pushed him to want to run for U.S. Senate. He says he knows it's an uphill battle. He's actually not out raising any money right now because Senator Schatz does have such a big war chest that he doesn't see the utility in that. Instead, he's turning to social media and traditional media and trying to get his message across there.
Yeah, and as someone who has served in the state house for some time now, and as part of the minority party there, any sort of loss for the Republican Party in the local politics and local house is a big deal because they are such a minority in terms of the relations with how many Democrats usually represent and fill those seats. And so by him making this decision, it's obviously something that is very passionate. He's very passionate about Red Hill, as we could hear from him. Him even saying that if he were elected and he's not able to shut Red Hill down, that he would give up his seat and that he wouldn't seek re-election. But, he specifically is calling for a exact shutdown date and holding the military as well as all those involved to that date. And also saying that this is something that cannot continue to function the way that it is, and just not happy with the plan that has been laid out thus far. We also obviously heard a striking difference in something that Senator Schatz is very passionate about, and that is climate change, and something that the representative from Ewa Beach does not necessarily agree with.
Yeah, he says that he does acknowledge that the climate is changing, but in his mind, he says he's a skeptic as to whether or not climate change is man-made or something that is happening, because of another source. So that was a very interesting and different take on that. Senator Schatz is famously called one of the three climateers in Congress, someone who has really made that the cornerstone of his policy and what drives him and his work in Washington. Another key difference you hear on the social issues when he talks about immigration, he certainly sounds very different than the sitting senator, and also his stance on abortion, that he is staunchly pro-life. He has really, displayed that throughout his time in politics, even locally, and something that he would continue to advocate for in Washington if he were given the opportunity to serve. Always interesting to hear a variety of views. That's why we have this program. We appreciate those of you who tune in. Remember, you can always catch us later as a podcast or on Channel 50, catch the replay. On Monday, we are going to be focusing on our issue with another representative from the legislature. That is Senator Stanley Chang. He is just getting back from Vienna. This is sort of an interesting take. He went to Singapore famously before and looked at their housing policy. Now he's going to be just fresh back from Europe and sharing his thoughts on what he found there.
Yeah, really, the senator making affordable housing his issue, trying to find ways to solve this problem that continues to be addressed in almost every election cycle that we talk about. So we'll be joined by Senator Stanley Chang to talk more about his findings and proposals moving forward into the next legislative session, and how he feels that the state can combat affordable housing and the lack thereof. So looking forward to that conversation. We hope you have a great weekend. We'll see you right back here on Monday for another episode of Spotlight Hawaii. Until then, take care. Aloha.
Aloha.
This episode of Spotlight Hawaii is brought to you by Long's Drugs.